Welcome, everyone. Great to have you here. Apologies for the late start. We've just been getting our Zoom technique back into order. I'm David LeMire, Master of Wine. I'm joined here by Martin Shaw, founder and long-time winemaker and partner in Shaw and Smith. And I also want to introduce to you Alex Kamata, our tasting room manager, and Tara Sullivan, our wine club guru, who are with us tonight. They will vet your questions and comments and pass through. We would love to have everyone visible to us and to each other, but the webinar set up with a number of people doesn't give us that option, but we will be able to have some audio questions as well as questions through Q&A. So you can do questions through the Q&A function. Alex and Tara will kind of pass those through, and we will answer them as best we can. But we do have lots to cover, plenty of wines to look at. And we're also keen to know what's in your glass, so do let us know what you're drinking. Some of you, I'm sure, will be drinking a number of wines that you've got in the packs, and some may be just opening one and saving others for later. But yeah, let us know what's in your glass. As Annabelle has done, starting with the Riesling. We've got both Sauvignon Blanc and Riesling in our glasses, so starting with the two unwooded wines out of 2021. Before we jump into the wines, I might just get Martin to tell us a bit about this vintage, which we are all very excited about.
Yes, welcome everybody. It does, I have to say, it feels a little daunting sitting here looking at a screen, not knowing if you're talking to yourself or actually sharing this with other people. So I hope we're not just sitting here rattling onto ourselves. But 21 is a vintage that we are really excited about. We've had a tough couple of years in 19 and 20, mainly with weather events, but bushfires and other things thrown in. But the 21 is one of those really great vintages. I can't remember what I'm up to. It's 40-something, but it's right up there. It was a vintage that was cool, good winter rains, cool spring, summer, autumn, never got really hot. We had little spurts of rain through, so we ended up with slightly above average, and I say slightly, maybe 5, maybe 10%, depending on variety, above average. But lovely natural acidity because of the cool season, and fruit flavours outstanding. And then later on with reds, because of the long cool autumn, terrific ripeness and flavour development, tannin development.
It's pretty interesting. For me, it was a vintage that we often think about the growing season from sort of September, October through to harvest. But the rains in June, July last year really set it up beautifully with that sort of soil moisture.
Well, it certainly seems to make for better flowering conditions. It also helps in avoiding good conditions for frost, which we also don't much care for. So the two 21s we have in front of us, David, we've got the Sauvignon in the left and the Riesling in the right. What are your thoughts on the Sauvignon?
Yeah, I think it's another vintage where those lovely mild conditions throughout February particularly, and we had 20 had a very cool February, and 21 I would say is sort of mild, and it's maybe a touch more generous than the 20, but this beautiful flavour and generosity and mid-palate texture. But yeah, also, as you say, really, really good fresh acidity. So it's pretty classic, isn't it?
It's very much benchmark Shaw and Smith Sauvignon. You've got some of those pink grapefruity characters. You've got, for a wine that's not been in bottle that long, it's very approachable and terrific drinking. So one for the books, I think.
Yeah, there's a natural balance there, I think, in this 21 vintage in general. It's not a vintage where anything sticks out, be it acidity or tannin in the reds, or it's got a really nice balance between everything.
You did right. I mean, it's one of those years. We find these days that we very rarely have to fiddle with wines, but these wines are all natural, and there's no acid adjustments, and they just have lovely natural balance. So the Riesling is the other one, which we had minuscule quantities out of 20, so it was nice to have an okay volume out of 21, but it shows very much hallmarks of a cool year, doesn't it?
Yeah. No, we haven't had a lot of Riesling to play with. We've had small yields and tiny yields in 20, so it's nice to have a little bit of Riesling in 21 to play with and show around, because it's a Hills Riesling. We love some of the famous Rieslings that you get from the Clare Valley and Eden Valley, but the Hills does give us something unique.
And these wines do tend to take a little bit of time to come together, and I think that part of that is intentional, because we want these wines to be really approachable when they're young, but we also want to be able to open them as 10-year-old wines and think that they are classic aged Rieslings. And in order to do that, they need to have slightly higher free SO2s, and that means that they need a week or two longer in bottle before they're settling.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we think of the hi to everyone in Sydney too. That's we are feeling for you. We think about Sauvignon Blanc as a wine that is fabulous, as a young wine, and good for a few years, but it's not going to be more complex and interesting after 10 years' time. We don't, we recommend drinking it within the first couple of years, because it's just so beautiful, fresh and young. With Riesling, it has just a longer career. It's got all of this potential bottle age complexity that is added through the journey. And these Hills Rieslings, this wine has really lovely fine acid. It's got floral notes. It's got a fine high altitude signature, I think, which kind of puts it just in a different place to Clare or Eden.
Absolutely. Some of you may be aware that we have a maturation release program, and Riesling is certainly one of the wines in there. And so for me, I think I really enjoy Riesling when it's young and fresh, and then I like to see it with a good deal of age. So we nominally choose 5 years as the benchmark age for the re-release Rieslings, and I think they're the two interesting points, 1 2-year-old wine or a 5+-year-old wine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and some people will gravitate toward the young, fresh styles, and some people will really like that more complex one. But they can both be terrific. So you kind of get, in a way, you buy these wines and you get two for the price of one. There you go. So that's the 21, Sauvignon Blanc and Riesling, and then we're
going to move on to 20 M3.
It's a smaller than normal crop. 20 copped a bit of frost, a bit of hail, and that's a low amount of yield on the vines. But then it did have this beautiful ripening period. And the last 4 to 6 weeks before ripening are really crucial, and 20 really delivered in that area. So
that's a really good point you make, David, because people talk about a warm season or a cool season, but for me, it's those last 2 to 4 weeks that are critical. They determine whether the flavour evolution is from a cool year or a warm year, but they also very much determine whether you've got good natural acidity or not. And in a year like '08, which was a stinking hot year, you just watch the natural acidity tumble, and certainly not the case in any of the recent vintages.
Yeah. It's Chardonnay is such a great variety in the Adelaide Hills. It loves the hills, and I think we've worked really hard, and Adam Waterwitz, who these days is Adam's our chief winemaker, and he's really driving the evolution of Chardonnay and the I guess the finesse of these wines is really exciting to see, but also just the way they reflect the hills, and in the case of Single Vineyard, the individual vineyards. And I think M3 has that texture and richness and flavour, but like the Riesling, in a way, it's got potential to age and develop, because it is picked with good acidities. The high altitude really helps with that, I think.
Yeah, and 20 was a little unique in that all the 20 M3 came from the three highest and coolest sites, being Piccadilly, Lengswood, and Sunloverfall.
Yeah.
There were none of the slightly warmer sites, so it does have that cooler edge to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a finer style, just a touch finer than normal, and it's had great acclaim since it was released. It's got, I think it was 98 points in the recent Halliday Guide, which is always, we try not to be too points focused. It's really, we're more focused on the words than the points, if you like. But it is nice to, just to see that people understand what we're trying to do with the wines, and that they get it. It's always nice.
I think in recent years, in particular, Chardonnay we're really nailing, and those two wines, both the 20 M3 and the 19. 19 Lenswood are terrific wines. I love the touch of struck match, funky character in the M3. It's there, but it's subtle.
And these characters, you don't want them to be too dominant, but they can add a bit of complexity. And that struck match is a really nice little character to see in there. G'day to Ali from NZ, and 2012 Chardonnay question from Jeanette, and can they continue to sell it? There's certainly no rush on the 12. I think for me, it's quite a nice time, quite a nice place to be drinking these Chardonnays in that kind of, it's getting, it's 9 years of age now, and that sort of 6 to 10 years, you've got some nice evolution and integration, and I think of it as harmony.
It was also a very cool year 12, so those wines age really well. We love the 12 M3. It's a terrific.
It's a very strong.
I'm not sure if the question was related to our 12 or 12s generally, but if it was 12 M3, then it's certainly a wine to keep. And the second question was recommended drinking for the 2020. Again, it's one of those interesting wines, isn't it? That I'm very happy to drink that 20 right now, but I will be equally happy drinking it as a 10-year-old wine. And I don't think, whereas Riesling tends to go through quiet patches. You don't see that so much with Chardonnay, do you? They just seem to quietly evolve and get more interesting tertiary characters with age. It probably is a very personal thing, I think.
I would say so. It's quite subjective, and some people like that. Want to really get into that freshness and vibrancy that wine has now. You can. I think of it in terms of three stages. You've got youth, within the first 2 or 3 years, where freshness is dominant and there are primary fruit characters and the acidity is really there, and it just is a lovely, fresh, young thing. And then you get into this sort of harmonised, the edges are kind of sanded and smoothed out, and the different elements have come together. And that's sort of the second phase. And for me, the third phase is this real bottle age complexity. And there you're seeing more dried fruit characters. You're getting some of the sort of straw notes, and you can get into a kind of buttered toast type characters. Just lots of lovely complexity. And for some people, that's super exciting. For others, like, no, I prefer as a 2020 drinking in 21. And there's no right or wrong in that.
So to Mark's question, 2000 was the first vintage of M3.
And thanks for the glasses, Mark. Always a pleasure drinking out of Riedel.
So the second one is the 19 Lenswood. Again, a small harvest. This wine has another year in bottle. It's
I think
probably wines that really are built to age, aren't they?
Yeah, generally a touch more tightly wound with the acid, a bit more lemon, lime, citrus notes. And they do take a little bit longer to sort of unfold and give everything they've got to give. But the single vineyard wines, and perhaps I'll touch more on when we get to the Barriana Shiraz, they really are about expressing a site and having that journey where you're seeing the evolution of the site and working hard in the vineyard to just get the best out of it, and then in the winery letting it express itself. We don't want to be putting a big thumbprint all over the wine, be it with oak or extraction or anything else. We want the vineyard to shine through, and so that Lenswood is a really special place, and it has this sort of easterly facing aspect. So it gets the morning sun. Faces the sun in the morning, warms up the soil early, and doesn't get the really hot sun of the afternoon. So it's a lovely spot. Yeah. Good.
I forgot we were going to do the same vineyards as a group.
Let's jump into the Shiraz. Yeah, no, we don't have the Pinots tonight, so should mention. 2020 Pinot was tiny, and the Pinot Noir from our Lenswood vineyard was affected by smoke in 2020. So those fires that we don't want to dwell on, because it was we kind of got through it and moved on, but it did mean we didn't we don't have Pinot, or there was a tiny amount of Pinot which those people who get it every year in the wine club got it, and that was about it. So there wasn't much, but again, that Pinot that we got, which was from a site that is west of where the fires were, so it completely escaped any of the fires. It really is a lovely aromatic Pinot. It's a lovely wine. It's just about 10 or 20% of what we would normally make.
Good question from Ben. How has M3 evolved since 2000? Maybe if I can just preempt that by saying prior to 2000, which was the first year the winery was built, there was Shaw & Smith Chardonnay. It was actually called Reserve Chardonnay. But because we were making it in other people's wineries, we didn't have the flexibility that we have here. So we couldn't whole bunch press until 2000. And that was a phenomenal turning point in the style of Shaw & Smith Chardonnays, because when you whole bunch press, you get extraction of far less tannins. The wines tend to go from wines that evolve very quickly to wines that have the ability to age well. So first point is that M3 post 2000, they do have great ability to age. But in terms of how the wines have stylistically changed, I think, David, you've been here for a fair bit of that time, not quite since 2000, but I think we are picking a little earlier, and that's probably helping retain natural acidity. And I think with older vines, higher, cooler sites, you're able to do that without getting green characters. So that's point one. We've always been fairly subtle with oak, but I think that we've got better with our selection of oak. We've probably gone to slightly larger format barrels, fewer barriques, more 300 litre functions, 500 litres. Malo is still there, but subtle. There's been a little bit more of those, kind of struck matchy, funky characters which add, their seasoning, and there's a bit more of those in more recent years. So the wines are, I think, for me, more complex, more interesting than they were 20 years ago.
Yeah, and I think we probably get freshness, has kind of become more of a feature as the wines are young, and so I think the wines that we're making now will age better than the wines we were making 15, 20 years ago. So, we're always trying to get better, and I think that's reflected in the Chardonnays. And the colours are lighter as well. That's kind of another thing that we said.
David, you can answer Annabelle's Pinot question.
Oh, yeah. Favourite vintage for the Pinot. So, as someone who is heavily involved in sales and marketing, 20 didn't give me a lot to play with. So that, and it's very young, but that's a lovely wine. Pinot, it's hard because we've made a lot of ground with Pinot in terms of our growing and our resources. So you've got the situation where our vineyards and our winemaking is improving, so they tend to be getting better if we look back since 2010, let's say. I mean, 9 and 10 were both, really, really smart Pinots. But I think our understanding and our techniques and our equipment and our farming takes the more recent ones to a different level. So I think when we think about the last 5 or 6 years where we've really been making a lot of progress, I think 19 is one of the really good ones.
I agree. 19 for me.
Yeah, it's got the beautiful perfume, but it also has a structure on the back palate. So it's very good.
And it's less to do with vintage and more to do with site and learning how to, vine age and learning how to deal with it. I think that they're getting better by the year.
Yeah, I think so.
So on to Shiraz. We've got in front of us now, we have the 19 Sharon Smith and the 18 Valhalla Vineyard.
And I think these wines show, Sharon Smith Shiraz is so approachable and, delicious straight off the bat, and the tannins are soft and supple and round, and the flavours are beautifully integrated, and these wines see about 14 to 15 months in French oak, and that really gives them time to just settle down and meld together, and the tannins to soften a little bit, and it really is a beautiful drink at a relatively young age, and it's got all that cool climate Shiraz. It's aromatic, it's medium bodied, and it's unashamedly medium bodied. It's not trying to be dense and big. It's just perfumed and elegant.
Absolutely, and I think interestingly, one of the things that we found more and more as we make more and more Shiraz is we love oak less and less in Shiraz. And I think some of you who are familiar with those more traditional Barossa and McLaren Vale Shirazes, they tend to be smothered with oak. We think that oak is important, but we don't use much new oak, do we? It's probably 20-25%. We like the larger format because we want the fruit to be star.
Yeah, that's right. It's, we also need to be very conscious that the beauty in our wines is in the perfume and there's a kind of restraint and delicacy to them. So the last thing you want to do is smother that in oak. So.
And that 19 for me is just a fabulous example of what Hills Shiraz could be. It's got buckets of perfume and lovely structure, and it's a wine that's going to age a long, long time.
Yeah, and I think of it, there's no heaviness, there's intensity, but there's not, bigness and heaviness, and so it has a refreshing nature to it as well. And it kind of contrasts a bit with the Balhana Vineyard, and this is a wine that sees a lot of the stems in the ferment, so we leave a whole lot of the bunches intact, whereas a lot of the conventional treatment of Shiraz is to de-stem, take the stems out and just ferment the grapes, crush the grapes and ferment the grapes. We like to keep a lot of the whole bunches, particularly in this Balhana Vineyard Shiraz, and it adds tannin and structure and ageability, and it also adds some really interesting spicy, almost sort of stemmy but not green flavour components. So it adds some really fascinating complexity, but also structural complexity, and it's pretty exciting because this is a wine where it's really fascinating now, but the rewards of this one from sticking away for 10 years are, really, really serious rewards for that.
So Jack has asked a question, a favourite standout Shiraz from the last 5 vintages. 18s were pretty special, and I think if you're this 18 Balhana that we're looking at now, we had a very long, slow, cool into the growing season, not very big crops, and it's got fabulous structure and tannin. So
18's a cracker, but and
19's pretty good.
19's were strong. 15 is a vintage that was a bit like 21, where everything did really well. So 15 will be one to if you've got 15s in your cellar, there's a lot of pleasure there for sure. If anyone has questions, we've got a few coming through on the chat, which is great, through Q&A, but if anyone wants to raise their hand and we can get another voice in this, that would be cool too. As I work out how to see raised hands. Remember how to do that. While people contemplate raising their hands and we work out how to see that, cellaring potential for 2019 Shiraz. Martin?
How long's a piece of string? I think this wine will age for a long time. What do you think? Look at 10 years and then have a look.
Yeah. I think we know when we look at a wine like from the mid 2000s, they're in good shape now, and I think these wines will age at least as well. So I think 15 years is comfortable. So
it's amazing, once you're talking about wines under screw cap, be it Chardonnay, be it Pinot, be it Shiraz. The aging potential, if you get everything else right, is phenomenal.
Now, Jack Spears. Jack, welcome.
Hi, Martin and David. Thanks for being on. Just love what you're talking about. I love the Balhana Shiraz. It's that depth and complexity that it has. I've got quite a few different years, and I just always enjoy opening one and sharing it with someone. And the stems that give it just an extra complexion. And I wondered whether you would even think about doing a bit more with the Shaw and Smith Shiraz, doing some of that with it it's just a great wine, I think.
Yeah, look, we do some. We don't do as much. So in the Balhana Shiraz, and we do. We don't want to be too recipe. We want to be responding to the fruit each year. So, but Balhana Shiraz, generally will have 50, 70, 80% whole bunches in it. The Shaw and Smith, the red cap Shiraz, tends to be a bit lower, but it does get up to around 40%, depending on the vintage. And one of the things in our minds is that when the whole bunches kind of make it a bit less approachable when it's young. So if you want a wine that's going to drink as well as that 19 drinks at 2 years of age, you just need to be careful about that balance early on. So it's kind of a bit of a trade-off for drinkability against that long-term complexity. What do you think, Matt?
Agreed completely. I think it's worth pointing out that it's a very rare practice in Australia. You see it, a bit in Northern Rhone. You see it quite a bit in Red Burgundy. But in order to do whole bunch, you've got to first of all hand harvest, and hand harvesting of red in Australia is a rare thing. So first of all, we do that. Then we put it all across a sorting table, and so that every bunch that goes into the fermenter has been checked by the pickers in the vineyard and then the people on the sorting table. So it does give us another level of quality control, which is important. But I love it, Jack. I think that sometimes when I look at wines that are more conventional, they just look a bit simple sometimes, and I think that the complexity and the spice and the interest that the whole bunch can bring is terrific.
Thanks, guys. It's I agree with you. You've got to get that balance about marketing too, and not everybody goes down the line that I like and selling wines, and so the Balhanas are great, and it's always a pleasure to open them. And Shaw and Smith every day at the barbecue is good fun. So thanks.
Perfect. Thanks, Jack. Appreciate it. And just following on from that, there's a lot of tastings of, tasting the stems, having a feel for the grapes. And not every vineyard can give you fruit that can handle having the stems in there, because so you've got to be selective each year, make sure that stems going in, that it's going to work. So,
and I think to that point, if you were to look at a very cool vintage like 17, you've got to be very careful about inclusion of stems, because what you don't want in a year that is already cool, so you're going to potentially get some green characters. You don't want to add extra greenness if the stems are not perfectly ripe. So it's
right approach for the year, the right approach for each site and each vineyard is absolutely. So we have
we've got a cork lover in the camp.
Love cork. I've seen glass caps with micro vents. I'm not familiar with the micro vent. I know Henschke have done a bit with glass caps, and I think they've had pretty solid results. But we're not narrow-minded, I don't think, about the seal. We really just want the wines to be in good shape, and so if there's good sort of scientifically proven performance from our closure, then we're open to it. At the moment, screw caps we've got a lot of confidence in. As other closures build up a kind of track record that we can trust, then we're open to it. And we do love, pulling a cork.
The look of cork and be it cork with a tin cap or cork with a wax seal, there is something about it. It is it's pretty nice, but we like the consistency. We like to open 12 bottles and know that they are all taste the same. They're all going to age the same way. We don't like opening 12 and finding that you have 6 different ones in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. And have we got Emma coming through? Oh, there she is. Hi, Emma. Well, you're off mute. Emma, welcome.
Emma, hello.
We can't hear you yet, but we can't seem to hear Emma, unfortunately. No?
Emma's gone.
No worries. So...
Sorry, you don't have me now. Sorry, I've got a mixture of devices running. Apologies. Hi, thank you very much. I'm a bit of a newbie to this, and we visited you. I came up with a couple of girlfriends in, I think it was May, and we had such an amazing time at Shaw and Smith. We loved your wines, and we came home as members and with a lot of stock being delivered quite soon after. Some of our favourites were the M3, I have to say, and the Toll Puddle. Could you just talk me through, if you wouldn't mind, those two? Because we're still debating which one we love the most, and I'd just like to understand a little bit more from a technical perspective, just to educate myself, if you wouldn't mind, on the difference between those two.
Yes, so Toll Puddle, you're talking about Toll Puddle Chardonnay, I presume, compared with M3. Yeah, because Toll Puddle has a Pinot as well, and I'm sure most of you are aware that Toll Puddle is separate to Shaw and Smith, but connected via ownership. It's a very special vineyard in Tasmania. And it's kind of like choosing between children. But I think they kind of give different things a bit, don't they? I mean, M3 has this consistently approachable, drinkable, and in the Adelaide Hills style of Chardonnay has some lovely, it's got balance, it's got freshness of acidity, but there's also some mid-palate flesh and texture. Toll Puddle is a bit more, it's a very cool place in southern Tasmania, but the seam of acidity is a real feature.
Yeah, look, I think we like to think the Adelaide Hills is a cool, as in temperature cool place to grow grapes. Coal River Valley is seriously cold. It's to put it in perspective, it's not quite as cold as Champagne, but it's colder than Burgundy. So it's on the extremes, but because it's dry, you tend to get very little disease pressure. Ripens considerably later than the hills normally, so you get different flavour profiles. I mean, with Toll Puddle, we wrestle with acid, with acidity. We virtually have to malolactic everything to try and tame the acidity, whereas in the hills it's easier. They're stylistically quite different, and it's fascinating. You'll put M3 in front of 6 people, or the 2 wines in front of 12 people. 6 will like one, 6 will like the other, and it's a personal thing. What I can say with the Toll Puddle wines is they have an immense ability to age. And our first vintage was 12. It's still a baby. It's getting a bit of tertiary character, but that'll be a wine that will go on for another decade probably. So
yeah,
don't know if that answers your question, Emma.
Well, no, we tasted it there, so it was. I actually missed the memo that it was made in Tasmania. Sorry.
No, that's all right.
We came on with a very big order, so I'm sorry. I didn't mean to stump you on that. Maybe I missed that part of the talk.
No. I mean, it does come down to that reflecting the sites, and so they'll always be. Even if we treat them exactly the same, they'll end up quite different because of the different origins, and we love that sort of detail of having something that really shows where it came from, because that's part of the wonderful element of wine. Got strong comments on corks. Yeah, well, I guess for us, we have a lot of confidence in screw cap, and we don't currently have the same confidence in cork. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that we're open-minded about it, and we don't like it when you have to tip out bottles because of it's spoiled by cork. That's for sure.
Yeah, Anthea, to your question about having to tip out lots of cork, bottom line, that's the reason that we went away from cork. How long? 15 years ago.
2005.
Yeah, and towards screw cap, because we just got so frustrated with the inconsistency, and we're going to take a bit of convincing to get back there.
Yeah, but we're open-minded. Yeah. Great. Well, we are just running a touch over time, so thank you, everyone. Thanks, Tara and Alex, and they'll be in touch over the next week. And there's a copy of this recording. So thank you, everyone, for jumping in, and hopefully you've enjoyed what you've opened. And for those in lockdown, well done for doing the hard yards, and hopefully it's not too much longer.
Cheers, everybody. Happy drinking.
Cheers.